Hey there, I'm Kathleen Jasper, and today we're talking about how to calculate your Praxis exam score. I'm going to give you a little information about raw scores versus scale scores, and also a little calculation you can use to estimate your approximate score. Let's get started. All right, I want to start this video off with a huge disclaimer. What I'm going to show you today is not released by ETS. This is not an exact science. And I'm going to show you how to calculate your raw score into your scale score, but it is by no means an exact science. Some of you are really interested in how these exams are scored, and I totally get it. You want to know what's up. You want to know why they're grading you the way they're grading you. So it's totally understandable. But ETS does not release that information. They just talk about the fact that they convert your raw score to a scale score. And I'll talk about that in a second. But the way they do it is not released. However, I went through a couple of other test prep companies, looked at a ton of information online, and looked into some universities who have released this information, and I'm sharing it with you today. But again, huge disclaimer, this is not endorsed by ETS. This is not an exact science. This is an estimation and a way for you to kind of understand how you take your raw score and turn it into a scale score, but it should not be the only way in which you determine your readiness to take the exam, okay? First, let's talk about the difference between a raw score and a scale score, okay? A raw score is the total number you get correct on a test. So let's say you take a test that has 100 questions on it and you got 68 correct. Your raw score is 68. That's your raw score because that's how many you got correct. Now, because the test is out of 100, your percentage correct is also 68. It's easy because it's out of 100. If it was out of another number, it would be more difficult for me to calculate off the top of my head. So I'm using 100. All right. So raw score is just the straight up how many you got right out of all the other questions. All right. And in this case, it would be 68. Now, a scale score is when the testing company converts that raw score into a scale score to kind of level the playing field among all the forms of the test that are administered. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you are going in to take the Praxis Teaching Reading 5205, and I am going in to take the Praxis Reading 5205. Let's just estimate it has 100 problems on it. It has more than that, but let's just say for the sake of this video, it has 100 questions on it, okay? And when I go in, I get a form of the test, Form A, and you go in and you get Form B. You are going to get a different test than I am, because if they just gave the same test over and over again, the test wouldn't be secure, it would be unreliable, and they call it item fatigue, meaning these items have been seen over and over and over again. What are we going to do? You're going to share them. You're going to talk online about them, that this happens, right? So in order to keep the test secure and reliable, they have different forms of the exam, and those forms are populated by item banks, meaning there's an item bank for phonological awareness. There's an item bank for phonemic awareness. Remember, we're talking about the teaching reading test. There are item banks for the writing there, and so from those item banks, I get 20 problems for phonemic awareness. I get 30 problems for writing, or whatever the percentages are for the content categories. And so my 100 question test looks different than your 100 question test, right? So let's say we both go in and I get 70% correct and you get 70% correct. You got a 70 and I got a 70. Our raw scores are both a 70. But let's say your test had higher complexity items on it, meaning you had more items that had those choose all that apply, or the real heavy scenario questions with the very long answer choices that have more cognitive demand. Those questions are worth more points. They're weighted. And so in order to level that playing field so that my score reflects my score and your score reflects your score, they put a scale score in place in order to even out those differences. So let's say you only got 50 correct on your exam and I got 60 correct, but your exam had harder test items on it. Your scale score is going to go up. and it's going to even it out. Yeah, I got 60 correct, but all of mine were easy. And you got 50 correct, and you had 10 that were much harder than mine were. Notice that they would have to put in a measure in order to even that out. So that's why they use a scale score, because they have to use different forms of the test, and that's how it works. Now, how do they figure out your scale score? Well, there's all kinds of mathematical wizardry and trickery. Not really. It's a statistical thing that they do, but I don't know how it's done, and ETS does not release it. So what we've done is we've used a little conjecture, used a little research, and I'm going to show you today how you can kind of calculate it. All right. So just remember that a scale score, and for the Praxis exams, it's 100 to 200 is the scale score. So they convert that raw score into a scale score, and that's what you see when you get your test results on the computer, and also on your score reports that come in the email, a few weeks after you take the exam. All right. So how does this work? How can we kind of calculate this? Well, let's just say that we are taking a test with 120 straight up selected response. Okay. There's no constructed response. It's just a multiple choice test. And let's say in my state for this exam, the passing score is a 156. All right. Well, if I want to kind of calculate where I am doing the practice test in the study guide, I could basically just calculate my raw score and do a little formula here. So let's say that the first attempt, I got a 57 out of 120 questions. Let me make sure my math is right here. So 57 divided by 120. Okay, good. So my raw score is a 57. Now my percentage correct is a 46% because I divided 57 by 120, just like you would in a classroom. If you wanted to figure out your percentage on a test, you would take how many you got correct divided by the total, and you would get the percentage. Okay. So in this case, I got a 46%. Well, if I wanted to figure out an approximate scale score, and this is with no weighting and no differentiation between hard questions and easier questions, that's why this is an approximation. You could drop this percent, add a 100, and you would get a 146. And so we're not there yet. You are not in this range at all, and you're not ready to take the exam. Well, let's say that I go in, I study the study guide, I watch the videos and all of that, and I go in and I take a new practice test. I take practice test 2, same thing, 120 questions. And for my state, I need a 156. Well, this time I got 68 out of 120. Make sure my math is correct on this one as well. And it is. So my raw score is a 68. Well, to get my percentage correct, I take 68 divided by 120. I get this 0.567, and I round. You want to round to the nearest 100th, and I get 57%. Well, if I drop the percentage at 100, I'm at a 157. This is why it's problematic to rely solely on this particular measure. Look how close it is. Yeah, I'm in passing range according to this, but I'm still very close. And let's say I can't, calculate the weight of the questions, how difficult they are. This can be problematic and not an actual measure. So it's okay to use this formula, and, I like it and all of that, but really you should be shooting for a 75% correct on your practice exams in the selected response, because that puts you in the 100% safe zone, whether they're low complexity, high complexity, mid complexity questions. You know that if you're getting 75% correct, you are in the zone. Now, you don't need 75% correct to pass. In many cases, you need a low D, a high F, a low C to pass these exams. So just understand that. And sometimes that makes people feel better. But I always recommend to know that you have the readiness necessary to take the test and pass. I always shoot for a 75 on the practice test. That's my rule of thumb, but you can also use this formula. All right, let's talk about those that have the constructed response. So let's have a look at, this is the special education 5543, and this particular special education test has a constructed response portion. You can see that there are 90 selected response questions and 3 constructed response questions. Okay. So let me break this down to you with a little bit bigger so you can understand. So for this test, the 5, 5, 4, 3, we have 90 selected response or multiple choice, and they are worth 75% of the exam. So they're not worth the whole test. They're worth a big chunk of the exam and 75% of the overall score. And then we have 3 constructed response questions, and those are 25% of the exam. Still a good portion. You don't want to flail on your constructed response questions, but it's not the bulk of your grade. Now, remember, each constructed response for this particular test, there are 9 total points up for grabs. Well, how is that? Well, if you go to the study companion and you go to the constructed response section, you will see that the highest possible score you can get on each constructed response is a 3. You can get a 0, a 1, a 2, or a 3. So 3 times 3 is 9, which means there are 9 total points up for grabs for the constructed response. So that's important when we need to know our total to figure out our percentage, okay? So let's say on my practice test, I got 52 out of 90 questions correct for the selected response. So my raw score is 52. Well, I divide that by 90 to get my percentage, which if I estimate here, it's 58% correct, all right? But I'm not done yet. That's only 75% of the exam. That's not the whole exam. So I need to multiply 0.58 or 58% by 75%, which gives me 0.435 or 44%. Now put that to the side. All right. Just put that number to the side. What we did here was we found our raw score. We divided by the total. We got our percentage correct, which is here. And then we took that and multiplied it by the percentage that is of the overall score. All right, now for the constructed response. Let's say that I worked on my constructed response. I did my 3 responses and I decided to do a self-assessment and look at the rubric and grade it myself. And I really recommend that you do that. You should write to the prompts and then grade it based on the rubric that's in the study companion. And so I have 9 possible points, because 3 possible points for each one, and there are 3. So 3 times 3 is 9. And let's say that I gave myself a 5, meaning I got a 2 on the first one, a 1 on the second one, and a 2 on the last one, according to my self-assessment. All right. So 5 divided by 9 is 0.556 or 0.56 or 56%. All right. But that's not the whole test. It's only 25% of the exam. So I have to multiply 0.56 times 25% or 0.25, and I get 0.14 or 14%. Okay. So now I have the percentage that I got correct for 75% of my grade, and I got the percentage I got correct for the additional 25% of my grade. These are the figures I'm going to use. Now, what do I do next? Well, I take my selected response total percentage that I just calculated, and I take my constructed response total that I just calculated. I add them together and I get 58%. Now I can drop the percentage, add a 100, and I get a 158. Now, again, this 158 is pretty close to this 153. In my opinion, it's too close. And so be careful, because again, what we just did does not account for the weight of the questions, how complex they're going to be, any kind of curveballs you might get on the exam. So this is too close. All right. I would say if you did this and you got like a 165, something like that, you're in the safe zone. But still, again, I always say 75% correct on the selected response. And if you got 75% correct on this selected response, this low score on the constructed response would be okay, because that selected response would, or the multiple choice or selected response would push you up. All right. Now you might say, but my score report says it was out of 19 or out of 18, not 9. When I got my score report back, it said 18. Well, yeah, these are ratios. They're fractions. 5 out of 9 is the same as 10 out of 18. There are 2 graders for your constructed response when it actually goes through the test, right? So one grader gives you a set of scores and another grader gives you a set of scores. So it's going to be out of 18, but regardless, it means the same thing. 5 out of 9 is the same as 10 out of 18. You get the same measure there. So just remember that it's out of 3. They're multiples of 3, 9, 18, 24. It doesn't matter. You're still going to get that same score because there are 2 graders at that point. Now, I do have a score calculator. You can find it in this How to Calculate Your Praxis Score blog, and I'll hook that up in the comments below. But you can see that you can get the score calculator here. And if I just enter my information and hit download now, you get this little thing and you can hit. Now, remember, you have to download the document to use it. I get share requests from people. It says, hey, share the document. I'm not going to share the document with you because I don't want you to change the document because everybody's using it. You need to download it, save it to your computer, and then you can use it. Let me show you what it looks like. This is what it looks like here. Obviously, it's on my drive, so it looks like this, but you need to go to File and Download, and you can download it into Microsoft Word, and then you can use it. You are not able to edit it inside my Google Docs because I don't want you to mess it up. And so here I give a quick understanding of what's going on. And then I have these little areas where you can calculate your Praxis score that has constructed response and those that do not have constructed response. So again, it's in this blog here. Let me refresh. You just fill out, it's right at the top of the thing. You just fill this out, hit download now, and you'll be able to access that Praxis score calculator. All right. So I hope that helps you today. Remember that blog that I just mentioned is in the description below, and you'll be able to access that Praxis score calculator. Please let me know if you have any questions in the comments. And remember, this is not an exact science. I'm doing my best to help you guys calculate your score. It doesn't mean that exactly what you do on your practice test is going to transfer all the way into test day. That's why I always say that 75% is really, really important. All right. Well, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know how things are going, and I hope you have an awesome day. Bye.